Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Leverton Review. I have one single question for you before we begin, which is, do you believe a man can fly? That was the tagline for the 1953 1978 movie called Superman, just Superman. And it wasn't the first Superman movie, but it was the first Superman movie in color, and it was one of the first major blockbusters. The summer blockbuster that started in the late 70s and maybe didn't really end until the pandemic, I would say. But yes, so there was Star Wars in 1977, of course, and then Jaws, and then Superman. And so I grew up with Superman. Like with Batman 1989, this is the version of Superman I am really comfortable with. And I think that it is a great film, but it's so wacky. And I'm going to tell you why it's wacky and why it's great. So, the first reason it's great is you just sit there and then you hear this, like, I can't do it, but the John Williams music. It's not Star Wars, but I think it's even more monumental than Star Wars. It's just like you sit down and you're like, this is the story of a god, basically, because Superman is a modern day god. Um, and then you have the first 40 minutes of the movie are all setting up Krypton and what Krypton was like. And Marlon Brando has a bunch of speeches and he exiles Zod and his allies to the Phantom Zone. And I really forgot about this. But it happens in the first movie. And Donner thought that I don't think that he directed the second movie, but he had like this vision for like these two movies. Um, but there was no guarantee that this movie would be a hit. So props to the ambition there that you would like set up these characters that are not even going to be in the movie, that they're going to be in the sequel. And I don't think people actually cared when they were like watching it because first 40 minutes you might think, oh, you'd be bored or something, but no, it's just so epic, and you can tell that they're using these models for Krypton. And if there wasn't the John Williams music there, it would feel really absurd. But the music really helps the special effects, and they're even though they do not look realistic whatsoever, I think some parts of it, especially when they get to the destruction of Krypton and the characters are wearing these reflective kind of clothing, it's really odd and really, really interesting and good. And then when you have Zod and his allies behind this weird hula hoop prism thing, when you know it was just like a hula hoop that they kept throwing up there, really, really, really cool. So then you have Superman, so Kal-El, the baby, is being sent to Earth, and I don't know why, but they had Marlon Brando do this like voiceover narration for Kal-El's journey to Earth, and basically, uh, he is teaching everything Kal-El needs to know, which is going to be a problem later in the movie. Not a problem, but maybe a bit of a plot hole in the movie later. But we'll talk about that when we get to that. But so he's like, here's the history of the universe. Here is the 49 galaxies that we're aware of, and blah, blah, blah. And he's just talking. And so basically, he sent his son because his planet was about to be destroyed, and he had like 48 hours. So he's telling his son all of the history of the world in 48 hours. And later we learn that it takes this trip took about 2,000 years or something. Some ridiculous amount of time because Krypton has been, because obviously Krypton's in another galaxy, so it would take a while for him to come to Earth. So uh, Kal-El was listening to his father on a loop. Every 48 hours it would start again. Oh my God! So what could he possibly have been talking about for 2,000 years? And even if he didn't sit there and record everything, even if it was like an AI avatar talking to Kal-El, I don't know anyone in the history of the world that could speak interestingly for 2,000 years. This is so crazy. So, uh, so after 40 minutes of this epic thing, we get Kal-El landing on Earth, and his parents are really delightful in this. We don't see a lot um, of his youth, and I guess that means that Kal-El, he knows everything that Jor-El told him, right? He didn't forget anything when he was on Earth. Um, but anyway, so basically, I don't know. I don't know if I need to explain the Superman story, but if you've never watched Superman, I guess I need to. So, Superman comes from a planet called Krypton. Krypton blew up, and his parents sent him away to Earth because Earth would be like a suitable environment for him to grow up. And they didn't really have any other plan. It was kind of an act of desperation, even though Jor-El, Kal-El's father, Kal-El is Superman, uh, was speaking to him for 2,000 years. They didn't really have a plan. And most Superman media doesn't really focus on his youth, apart from some Superman comics and the great but very uneven series called Smallville. And I say it's uneven because uh, there's a lot of plot that goes into Smallville that doesn't really make sense in the mythos of Superman. I kind of like it how I like the idea that Jor-El just randomly sent Kal-El to Earth because it was suitable and he didn't really think more about it. It was an act of desperation. So basically, Kal-El, his spaceship lands, and in the movie we see Martha Kent and oh, I forgot what his Earth father's name is. Jonathan Kent. I don't think he has a name. I think he's called Jonathan in Smallville, but I think maybe that's a Smallville edition. But anyway, so Jonathan and Martha, they see this flash of light, and then there's like a crash. So they go and look, and they see that there's a baby in the crash, and they're like, "Oh, what's happened?" And Jonathan is still. I mean, why? I don't know why you would immediately jump to conclusions that it was an alien. And Martha is like really excited because she's like, "Well, we could keep him." And Jonathan's like, "Well, we got to find his parents." And Martha's like, "Well, I don't think his parents are from around here because I don't think Jonathan was like catching on to the fact that it's an alien boy." And they're having this conversation, and Jonathan has some heart problems, so he drops this. He's trying to fix a tire in his car, and he drops the jack, and the car almost falls on him. But little Clark, Kal-El, is holding the car, and I remember this scene making such an impression on me. Like this baby is lifting up this car, and I don't know how they did that really, but it's a practical effect, right? And Jonathan's like, "Oh yeah, he is not from around here." So we skip all of Clark's growing up, and basically we come to him when he's finishing high school. And this is the first part of the movie that I think doesn't really work that well because before you didn't have Kal-El actually speaking. It was more like world building. And later, Clark is going to be played by one of the best Supermen and Clark Kents of all time, which is Christopher Reeve, and he has such natural charisma that the fact that they hired another actor, and I don't know if you haven't seen Superman in a while, you might be surprised that, yeah, they hired another actor to play teenage Clark Kent. And I don't think he does a bad job, but he definitely doesn't have the same charisma that Christopher Reeve has. His facial structure is not the same. He doesn't look anything like Clark Kent. And he has to be like this his awkward self, right? He has to try and pretend not to be super strong, and there's this whole thing like, about how, and I think that this comes to the heart of the Superman character, is like, he is so powerful, but he can't control everything. Like, and at this moment, Jonathan Clark dies of a heart attack, and Clark says, I'm so powerful, but I can't save my own dad. So that's kind of an interesting theme that they don't really go back to. I mean, they do kind of, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But Clark is being bullied basically because he can't fight back, and he's interested in Lana, but Lana's like riding around with these typical 1950s teenage boys. So then Clark's dad dies, and he decides he's going to finish high school and he's going to go off and learn how he's going to use his powers. So how does he do this? He goes to the Arctic and he creates the Fortress of Solitude. And I don't understand why it's in the Arctic, because this might be surprising, but the Arctic is surprisingly accessible. You've got Russia, you've got Greenland, you've got Canada, you've got Alaska. So if there was a Fortress of Solitude in the Arctic, people would notice. So why not put it in Antarctica? That would make more sense to me, but that's not a problem with this particular version of Superman. It's a problem with every version of Superman. It doesn't really make sense to put it in the Arctic, in my opinion. But anyway, he builds the Fortress of Solitude, and Jor-El has another AI version of himself that is going to teach Clark for 2 years what he needs to do to be about the human heart, about like everything that he needs to learn. But what was he doing for the 2,000 years in the spaceship? It doesn't make sense. Oh, right. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about that is so completely odd to me is, for the most part, as I said, the special effects really hold up. But there's a scene where Clark is racing this train. And when I was a kid, I didn't really think about this scene. I just, yeah, he's running fast. What's the problem? But the way that they made him look like he was running fast, they didn't do this thing, which I think most movies would do at the time, which actually is the way to do it, I think, is just to have somebody run regularly and then speed it up. They did some weird kind of special effects with his legs to make it look like he was running fast, but it did not work at all. It was a failure. So if I was going to remaster that, I'd take that scene out, and I don't know, I just take that scene out and just say that he ran and we didn't see him run, because geez, that's really embarrassing. So that's the first really kind of moment in the movie. So then he goes on to learn all about life from Jor-El again, and that's the last we see Jor-El. Jor-El is not important to the plot of this movie whatsoever. He's probably going to be important in the sequel, because then Zod comes back and Zod wants revenge, and Zod is basically a war criminal. So yeah, but back to this movie. Then, after about 50 minutes, or maybe even an hour, we're finally introduced to the main characters of the Superman saga. So, Clark Kent, Jimmy Olsen, Perry White, and of course Lois Lane. And Lois Lane is played by Margot Kidder, who does a really great job of being this kind of hard-nosed reporter and also somebody who is so into Superman that you can tell. Um, and of course, as I said, Christopher Reeve has this sort of like really natural charisma that comes off really well in this movie. And he's able to make like these really kind of subtle jokes that just land because of his delivery and his just his way of being. There is one where so Perry White, the editor, is trying to open a bottle of soda or something, and he can't get it open. So he hands it to Clark to open it, and Clark, of course, can open it in like he doesn't even he can just pop it off. But of course, he needs to pretend to be like weak, and he's struggling with it, and then Lois kind of not thinking about it. She's like, "Oh, let me help." And like she shakes it, so then when he does open it, it like sprays all over him and he says she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Clark." And then Clark says something like, "Yeah, you wouldn't intentionally try to make your coworker look bad in front of his new boss, would you, Lois?" And she's like, "Oh." But he's saying it in like a joking way, but you know, he kind of means it, but he's not being mean spirited. He's just stating a fact. And Lois is like, "Oh, he's smarter than he looks." Yeah. And then there's another scene. Like basically the way the movie constructs their relationship is really great. There's a scene where they get mugged and Clark is trying to pretend to be like really, really weak, but he ends up catching a bullet and saving their lives. Uh, and then kind of Superman arrives in the scene on the scene of Metropolis, and there's a bunch of scenes of Superman doing sort of Superman things. He saves Lois from a helicopter that's going to crash. He saves Air Force One. But he does smaller things as well, like he stops this robbery, and he also this is one of my favorite scenes of the movie. Like he, I guess, hears a cat in a tree, so he goes down and he sees this little girl who's trying to get the cat out of the tree, and he says, "Ma'am, would you like me to get your cat?" And she says, "Yes." So Superman goes and gets the cat, and he says something like, "Here you go, ma'am." And the thing is great because the girl is like 7 or 8 and he's treating her with the respect that she deserves. "Here you go, ma'am." Not "here you go, little girl," but "here you go, ma'am," because Superman respects people. Clark respects people. Like the whole idea of Superman is like, what if a god was raised by nice and kind people? And that's what you get. And I don't know, 2,000 years of Jor-El lecturing or something. Yeah, and there's also, of course, this great kind of subplot of Lois kind of falling in love with Superman, and Clark and Superman kind of falling in love with her. And like there's this great interview that they have on the rooftop. She has this great apartment with like this patio that's open to the city, and they're talking, and it's like full of double entendres. And Lois is clearly really into him, and he is being polite, but also kind of like joking around with her in a really good way. And he says like some crazy things that people don't say, and Lois believes him because he's Superman. Like he says, "I'm Superman. I don't lie, Lois," which is interesting because his whole identity is sort of a lie, which is really, really interesting. Another kind of small random thing that I just thought about, which is interesting, is that in a lot of the stories of Superman, they try to like explain where the costume comes from, and they do show that the S is the mark of L, like the clan of L. It doesn't mean Superman. But they don't show him making that suit, right? There's no connection between what the 40 minutes in the beginning and then this red and blue iconic look. There's no connection whatsoever, so that's kind of interesting. Um, there's another thing that happens in the whole whole movie. There's so many things to talk about, but I want to stick with Superman and Lois because there's the other ridiculous thing apart from the running scene in this movie is Superman takes Lois for a flight. And Lois is like really, really excited and, scared like you would be. And she's realizes that she's falling in love with him. And she has this interior monologue, which is a poem. So she like creates a poem in her mind and basically one of the lines, and it rhymes. Every line of this poem rhymes, and I'm not gonna say it because I don't remember everything. But basically, oh, can you read my mind? I wonder if you would like what you would find, and it just goes on like that, and it's so dumb, so bad. Ah, and I think that it's dumb because one is cheesy. That's the main reason it's bad. And the other reason is that Lois, you can tell that she's attracted to Superman and you can tell that she really likes him, but and the reason we have this poem is to show her interior monologue, but Margot Kidder is such a great actress that you don't need the interior monologue. And Lois Lane is probably one of the best reporters in this world, but she's not a poet. Like, no one has accused her ever of like poetic writing. She can barely spell. And that's another part which is great about the movie is so um, Superman says that he is from Krypton, and then she's like, "Oh, Krypton, right?" And she starts to, and they make a big deal about how she can't spell before, and they're like, "Ah, oh, Krypton, how do you?" So she's like, "Okay, CRI, like why not?" And he's like, "No, no, 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 KRYPTON, Krypton." And it's like, wait a minute. How does an alien planet in another galaxy have the Latin alphabet, Like they don't have the Latin alphabet, so you can spell Krypton however you want. It's like, I don't know, spelling some Chinese thing, like a Chinese name. There's multiple ways of spelling it because people in China don't use that alphabet generally. So they don't actually spell their names with a Li, uh, you know. So anyway, kind of a funny moment. And I forgot the other part of the movie that's great is Lex Luthor. So Lex Luthor is played by Gene Hackman. And I know that this version of Lex Luthor is kind of controversial because he's really brilliant, but he's not exactly a mad scientist type. And some people prefer Lex Luthor to be the mad scientist type, but I really appreciate that the villain is a scummy real estate mogul. And I think this was even before Donald Trump was super famous. So it's not like they were like inspired by Trump like other versions of Lex Luthor have been. I think the uh, DCU one was kind of inspired by Trump and inspired by all of those crypto bros and Zuckerberg and all of that stuff. But he is sleazy. He's funny. He's got like so many, like, Superman has all of these one-liners that kind of land because of Christopher Reeve's charisma. Um, I forget exactly which of them, but um, Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor has like these ridiculous things that are just so over the top, and they're just so funny. He's mean, but he's funny. And then there's this part where they're trying to like redirect these missiles because part of the plot is that Lex Luthor wants to basically break off California, and he's bought all this real estate just outside of California. So when California sinks to the sea, he'll have all of this property and he'll be like really, really wealthy. I'm not sure how he's going to enjoy that in prison, but anyway. So they're trying to redirect this missile, and his henchman was asked to do something, and the henchman is named Otis, also a great character, and he's got another one called Miss Tesselmacher, also great. And I love the fact that no one in the movie ever says Miss Tesselmacher's full name. Interesting. So basically, that's his love interest. Yeah, there's this moment where he gets mad at Otis and he's actually driving and he just lets go of the wheel and goes attacking him because that's the kind of like unbalanced guy this is. Completely brilliant, but doesn't really think a lot about it. So anyway, the plot kind of starts to unfold, and this is another thing that generally in the Superman mythos doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but it's not a problem with this specific movie, which is kryptonite, right? So kryptonite lands on Earth and it causes big problems for Superman. But how did kryptonite get from a planet in another galaxy to Earth? There's a bunch of stuff in the way. It wouldn't exactly go to Earth. The reason Superman landed on Earth is because his dad sent him there. It's not like it just exploded and then, bits of the planet landed on Earth, because that would be like if they made it like, oh, the stuff from Krypton caused the extinction of the dinosaurs or whatever, maybe. And maybe if it was in the same galaxy, it would make more sense. But yeah, anyway, Lex finds this kryptonite and he understands through very flimsy movie science that this kryptonite would be dangerous to Superman. He makes this trap where he traps Superman and he throws them in his pool. I didn't talk about this before, but Lex also has a really great lair. It's under Central Station in New York, and he's got like this lake and this big library. These people have such great accommodations, so great. So they tie like this chain with kryptonite on top of Superman, and Superman's in the water. And Lex has decided that he's going to, one of the nuclear missiles is going to land on the city where Miss Tessmacher's mother lives. And Miss Tessmacher is like, Superman, you got to help my mom. Promise. If you promise you'll help my mom, I'll believe you. And she's like, and Superman's like, yeah, okay, I'll save your mom first. And then for whatever reason, she kisses him and then takes it off. And then he's like, why did you kiss me first? And she's like, well, you wouldn't have let me do it if I took it off first. And he's like, oh, okay. Then he flies away. And then he saves the day. But then there's something that's famously ridiculous about this movie, which is that so he's flying around and he doesn't have enough time to rescue Lois. He averts the tragedy of California falling into the ocean, but Lois gets crushed to death. So he gets really angry and he decides to reverse time by flying around the Earth and causing the Earth to rotate backwards, which that's not how that works. Unless it's some kind of magic thing that he's doing where he's able to like create a time. This is how it works. He goes so fast, He's not reversing the rotation of the Earth. He's creating a time vortex. He's going into the Speed Force and creating a time vortex and taking the entire planet back I don't know, 15 minutes, whatever, and then he's able to save Lois. Is that ridiculous? Yes. And they do kind of like call back to Jor-El's 2,000-year lecture, because one thing that gets repeated is that you must not interfere in human history, which is a really odd thing to say, because this is the crazy part if you think about Superman. I have so many things to say about Superman, but if you think about Superman, Superman's only weakness is kryptonite. And if you remove kryptonite, he will continue to live. Superman on our planet with our sun is practically immortal because he's invulnerable, he doesn't age, he gets his power from the sun. So he will live a lot longer than civilizations, unless they do some weird thing like he has to give his heart to his father-in-law or something like they did in Superman and Lois. Great series except for the finale. That was really, really dumb. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Superman 1978. So is the fact that he flies backwards weird? Yes, it's very, very weird. But does it fit with the whole vibe of the movie? Yes. I think that this movie is so delightfully odd because it doesn't have editing, it doesn't have pacing, but it's just like the music of John Williams is like a character in itself, and he should have won an Oscar for that. I think he did win an Oscar for the score, but he should have won a Best Supporting Actor Oscar because it's just so important. And not only like the monumental stuff, although that's really great, there's times in the movie where like a car will be driving along, or like Otis and Luther in the van, and there'll be like this like little cheerful little thing and you don't even notice it. So it's really, really great. And then of course Christopher Reeve as Superman and Margot Kidder as Lois Lane, they have like this natural chemistry together, and it really, really works, and it's so enjoyable. It's so enjoyable, in fact, that if you watch this movie like 10, 15 years ago and I ask you like to tell me about it, you're probably not going to remember the first hour of the movie. And it's not like you're going to be like, oh, I don't remember the first hour of the movie. You're going to be like, yeah, Superman crashes on Earth and then he meets Lois. He grows up and he meets Lois, and that's the beginning of the movie. No, that's not the beginning of the movie at all. That is actually almost the end of the movie. So they have such a great charisma and chemistry together, and it's really cool to see Superman do Superman things. And Lex Luthor, as I said, is just wild and over the top. That's really fun as well. And I like the fact that Superman is this god and he has kind of tiny problems to deal with, And I think the great thing about his character is that he could just save the entire world by murdering Lex Luthor, right? But he doesn't, because he has morals and he has values and he has ethics, and he realizes that human life is important, even though it's a lot less powerful than he is. So that's really, really good. And that's why the Superman character endures, because he is this kind of symbol of hope. And even though the movie has some really odd choices, like that running scene in that poem, it just really works. Like, it's just a mismatch of things. It's not edited well. There's no pacing to the movie. But when you're sitting there, you're not like, oh, this is so long. You're like, oh, okay, that was 50 minutes of Krypton. Okay, great. You know, it's such a great movie. I think while I did like the version of Superman that came out in 2025, I don't think that it's as good as this one. I think it's better than you know, the Henry Cavill Superman movies. Not that Henry Cavill did a bad job, it's just they didn't really understand the character of Superman. So it's different, it's unique, but in my opinion, not better. And I think maybe this Superman's legacy is a bit tarnished by the movies that came afterwards, which were really bad. I don't know. I don't remember Superman 2, but I will watch that soon, so I'll let you know what I think about it. But yeah, but if you forget about those bad movies, this movie is great. I think um, I don't know. I think you could put it in one of the best movies ever category. Maybe not in like the top 100 or the top 200, but top 1000, sure, because it has the great score, it has the charisma between Christopher Reeve and Lois Lane and Lex Luthor being wildly over the top. Yeah, I would say it's in the top 1000 movies of all time. And would you believe a man can fly? I haven't really talked about that, but that special effect of Christopher Reeve flying, it still holds up. I mean, it doesn't look very realistic, but you'd be like, yeah, he's flying. Okay, I believe that. All right. So, what did you think about Superman 1978, the classic? One of the top 1000 movies of all time, in my estimation. Well, what do you think about it? Put your thoughts in the comment section. If you like what I do, like the video, leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to 10 subscribers by the end of June, which I think we can do. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.